2008, Women in Power. The moon hidden in deep shadows, her brother passes by rusty-colored. The great one masked for a long time beneath eclipses. Iron will cool in the bloody wound. From Centuries 1, verse 84. A new law will emerge in the new world of America at a time when Syria, Judea, and Palestine are significant. The great barbarian empire of patriarchy that men have created will decay during the time that the feminine spirit is completing its cycle. Centuries 2, verse 42. From Peter Lorre's Nostradamus, 2003 to 2025, chapter 2008, Women in Power. For those of us who have taken the laborious trouble to read all of Nostradamus's approximately 1,000 verses, it becomes evident that a rather large number of them seem to make no sense at all. These are generally attributed to the future, that unmapped country, in the hope that someday an event will occur that will, quote-unquote, fit, or almost, the mantle of the prophet's vision. Otherwise, these enigmatic quatrains are nothing more than the meandering of a madman who had his moments. Or the alternative this author prefers, Nostradamus was not concerned only with world-shattering events like wars, disasters, and royalty. He also paid attention, perhaps even unwittingly, to the softer, more delicate, and more sensitive areas of the future. One of these can be seen as the future of women, exemplified by the verses above, which, as usual, at first appear bizarre, but with a closer look, become clearer. The shadowed moon refers to women who are shadowed by the activities of men in their constant quest to conquer and dominate their female partners. The women's movement began to grow significantly only during the 20th century. Until the World Wars, women generally had a poor deal, but according to Nostradamus, the rise of women in power will become far more significant yet. Women, quote-unquote, hidden in deep shadows, for centuries intended only for marriage and childbearing and child-rearing, are still hidden from the sun in many parts of the modern world. Men in Iraq, Iran, and other Islamic areas still cannot face their fear of the opposite sex and hide their women behind costumes calculated to prevent their femininity from being manifest, altering their religious scriptures to provide an excuse for this archaic and prejudicial behavior. Even many African tribes are not this primitive. And if the truth be known, even in Western society in the United States and Europe, many women are still forced by their conditioning, their family beliefs and habits, into staying largely in the home and being dependent on their husbands. For a woman to rise to the levels of business achievement is still much tougher than for men in a world with male-dominated clubs, boards of directors, and medical and legal professions. All this will change. Quote, her brother passes by, rusty-colored, end quote. With a touch of wry humor, Nostradamus comments on how men will go rusty as their power diminishes, while women grow stronger in matters of the world's growth. The metaphor of the great one masked for a long time beneath eclipses, iron will cool in the bloody wound, refers both to the aggression of a male-dominated world and the male sexual organ being cooled in the blood of female menstruation. Perhaps much of the future will change when men no longer rule the planet so aggressively, and women get a chance to find us all a more peaceful coexistence. How different it might be if Iraq were ruled by Mrs. Hussein or Yugoslavia by Mrs. Milosevic. To put the potential change in feminine power in the future into the context of life on this planet, here is the history of woman on Earth from Nostradamus' time to today. One of the most important messages within the quatrains is that there will come a time at the beginning of this millennium when a critical mass of female power will occur. The timing of this change is established by the fact that Nostradamus makes frequent reference to the New World or New Country, meaning America, as being the catalyst for such change. The United States has become a superpower only in the last half of the last century. The concept of critical mass was formulated first in physics, which defined it as the minimum quantity of radioactive material needed to produce a nuclear chain reaction. In human terms, a critical mass may occur in a social environment where dissatisfaction grows to a level where revolution occurs, simply through the gathering of enough angry people, all in one place, all with sufficient energy to force change. The surrounding environmental and social response to this catalyst also play a part in the size and shape of the resulting new paradigm. Once this critical mass has reached its peak, the result is a self-sustaining change. Paradigm shifts occur in this way. As we shall see in this chapter, Nostradamus' verses can be interpreted to predict the formation of a critical mass of women with a militant march across Europe. According to the verses quoted below, a large group of women will take a militant stand in order to effect major changes within contemporary society. We may feel that this has already happened during the 1980s and early 1990s, with militant feminism playing a strong part in helping to shift the stubborn male domain. But according to this interpretation of Nostradamus, there is more to come, or in truth, the patriarchal format still dominates the civilized world. That doesn't sound right. First come the literal translations of the verses, and then there follows a more free interpretation. From the shore of Lake Garda to Lake Fucina, taken from the Lake of Geneva to the port of L'Orguillon, born of 3 arms, the predated warlike image threw 3 crowns to great Endymion. From Sens, from Autun, they will come as far as the Rhone, to pass beyond and towards the Pyrenees mountains, the nation to leave the march at Ancona. By land and sea it will be followed by great trails. The voice of the unusual bird is heard on the pipe or cannon of the floor. So high will come from the wheat the bushel that man will be accountable to man. Lightning in Burgundy will make something portentous, one which could never have happened through skill. A sexton made lame by the Senate will inform the enemy of the matter. Thrown back because of bows, fires, pitch, and more fire. Cries, shouts are heard at midnight. Inside they are put onto broken battlements. The traitors fled by underground passageways, great Neptune from the deep sea, with Punic forms mixed with Gallic blood. The isles bleed because of the late rowing. More harm will it do to him, the badly conceived secret. The beard sizzled and black because of skill will reduce the cruel and proud people. The great Chiron will remove from far away all those captured by the banner of Selene. After the conflict, by the eloquence of the one that is wounded, for a short while a false rest is managed. The great ones are not to be allowed to be delivered at all. They are returned by the enemy at the right time. Through fire from the sky, the city is almost burned. The urn threatens Deucalion again. Sardina, made angry by the Punic foist, after Libra will leave her faith on. Through hunger, the prey will make the wolf prisoner, the aggressor, and then in extreme distress, the heir having the last one before him. The great one does not escape in the middle of the crowd. Centuries 2, verses 73 to 82. These are among the most fascinating of all the quatrains in the centuries, particularly as they seem to form a story running longer than any other series of verses appearing to refer to one event. It can be inferred from this that the event described, a march of women under the banner of Selene, parentheses, the moon goddess Selene, across the power centers of Europe, is one of the most significant in history. And although during the early 21st century some may not expect there to be a need for still greater feminine militancy, there's little doubt in the author's mind that it is time that the patriarchal system fell by the wayside. Previous societies, pre-Sumerian, pre-Egyptian, early European, have lived by different codes without the domination, competitiveness, and aggressiveness of the modern world. and they have been shown through recent anthropological discoveries to have lived more happily and with less misery than ourselves. As we shall see in the coming pages, Nostradamus foresaw a similar world to those ancient, peaceful, non-patriarchal societies, returning to Earth through the influence of woman. So perhaps we can first free interpret the lines of these verses to examine more closely where the prediction leads us. From the shore of Lake Garda in northeastern Italy to the former Lake Fucino, now drained an area of land 65 miles east of Rome, moving from Lake Geneva in Switzerland to the port of Orgueil, to be discussed later. Born out of 3 labors according to a predicted warlike image, through 3 wreaths to the great lover of the moon, Endymion, son of Zeus, was the lover of Selene, goddess of the moon, from Sens, in northeast France, then in the Duchy of Burgundy, and Autun, also in Burgundy, 100 miles from Sens. They will come as far as from the river Rhone, They will come as far as from the river Rhone to travel as far as the Pyrenees mountains. Of those arising in Italy, a group of people will leave the march at Ancona, east coast of Italy. By land and sea, it will be followed by great trails. A big, unusual bird, possibly a bird of prey or a symbol, will be high in the sky where the air is still breathable. Down near the earth is a layer that is not breathable, where men live and a famine exists, making men cannibals. Powers in Burgundy will inflict punishment on the people of the march, and this will be told to the marchers by a disempowered cleric serving the state. They will be repelled by fire and weapons with cries heard at midnight, and traitors to the cause will escape through underground passages. Forces, probably military or police, from the Ottoman Empire in France, a fundamentalist backlash, will stand against the march coming from the sea, though because of a late start will fail to stop it. Men, bearded, burned by the skill of the marchers, will fight and beat them cruelly. The great comet Chiron will be seen moving far away by all those under the banner of Selene. After the conflict, an eloquent individual who is wounded secures a truce, which proves to be false, for the rest of the marchers, while those leaders who were captured by the enemy, presumably men, are returned at the right time. Because of bombs or rockets, a city nearby is burned. The son of the creator of mankind, Deucalion was the son of Prometheus, the creator of mankind in Greek mythology, whose task it was to renew the human race, is threatened again, and the conflict is made worse by involvement from the people of Sardinia, which after Libra, an astrological reference, will leave her faith on, a mythological reference to be explained. Because of a yearning, the women will make the men prisoners so that they are very distressed. Even if the new heir, woman, stands behind the great one, man, she will now be noticed. In translating and interpreting these complex and fascinating lines, we've used a number of devices. Local historical references and symbols that have some connection with the lifetime and locations of Nostradamus himself. In the author's previous book, Nostradamus, The Millennium and Beyond, it was suggested that Nostradamus used his own period of history, including people and locations, as metaphors for events in the future. Mythological symbolism from the distant past, such as Greek mythological heroes like Phaethon, a knowledge of history as it has developed up to the 21st century. In other words, we are aware that there is a growing feminist movement and have therefore applied this knowledge to the verses. Employing the above methods, the outline of a story is revealed of a march of women across Europe involving a large part of Italy, Switzerland, and France, initially to establish rights that have not been granted to them, but evolving into a very significant event on the global scene. These rights may well concern equality, money, and effectiveness in society, and by the tone of the overall prediction, this is a major event also in the history of womankind. The march, undertaken presumably by a large number of women, derives from a number of starting points: northern Italy, the area of Rome, from Switzerland near Lake Geneva, and an area that is given the title Le Orgueillon, which is interpreted by Edgar Leone, parentheses, one of the most prosaic and intelligent interpreters of Nostradamus, close parentheses, to refer to the town of Orgon, 20 miles north of Salon, where Nostradamus lived, and which was perhaps either coincidentally or significantly an area where in 1864 a meteorite fell. This meteorite was found to contain elements of carbon, seeds, reed, and other fragments indicating the presence of life in another part of the universe. On closer examination, it became clear that these items had been embedded there deliberately in an attempt to create a hoax. This reference may have some significance once the March of Selene movement occurs. Something that needs to be understood about Nostradamus' vision is that very often scenes and concepts, words and facts might be given to him that made little sense even to him, so that we are interpreting something that can only ultimately be verified when and if it actually occurs. In the free interpretation, we see that the movement is born out of 3 labors and a, quote, predicted warlike image, unquote, of 3 wreaths under the lovers of Endymion, whom we connect through mythology with the moon. It is said that Nostradamus himself was unable to interpret this enigmatic verse, though there are those in his future, parentheses, the interpreter Allen, who wrote in 1943, close parentheses, who believe it refers to America because of the mythological connection between Endymion and Selene, who put him into a perpetual slumber so that she could caress him at will. Why this should be seen as a metaphor for the United States is something of a mystery, unless we believe that in the context of feminism, the United States is asleep to the feminine spirit, or else that man has put women to sleep so that he may caress her without making love to her. A more likely explanation is that the banner carried by the women of the Selene movement contains symbols of labor and 3 victors' wreaths that have some significance at the time, and this warlike image associated with the moon is clearly another symbolic reference to the need for an aggressive and powerful stance by women to achieve their ends. The moon as symbol of womanhood is clear. The story continues, telling us which regions the marchers will come from and where they will all march to, converging, it seems, on Ancona, on the eastern coast of Italy. We then read of conditions that sound extreme, to say the least. High in the sky, the air is breathable, whereas close to the ground, the atmosphere is polluted, and men suffer from famine. Parentheses, in the original, Nostradamus refers to the pipe of the air vent floor, an extraordinary piece of 21st century description for a 16th century writer. Close parentheses. Nostradamus has a habit of expressing things in an extreme way, but if we consider how our own time would have looked from his vantage point before the Industrial Revolution, when air was pure, when motor vehicles were unknown and rivers and oceans were still free from pollution, it might well seem to him that our air was not breathable and that we were suffering from famine. It could also be that he was not necessarily referring to famine in Italy, but in other parts of the world, thus giving us a time frame to date the prediction. In effect, the Selene movement and the march across Europe are linked to the modern industrial age and could therefore occur at any time in the latter years of this century. We then receive some details of hostile local governments, parentheses, the Burgundians in the previous century had captured Joan of Arc and handed her over to the English for trial, close parentheses, and of escapes through underground passages, together with political and military forces, in parentheses, Punic forces mixed with Gallic blood, which is both Christian and Islamic, close parentheses, being deployed to prevent the to prevent the march from progressing. This march will incidentally be the first to occur across several borders, a truly international revolutionary march. Its route, perhaps coincidentally, according to Nostradamus' description, traces in reverse Hannibal's march against Rome in 218 BC during the Second Punic War, traveling over the Alps down the Rhone Valley into southern France and then to Spain, somehow signifying a reversal of historical process. The journey from Rome to Carthage can be seen as a return to the early Mediterranean religion. In the sky during the march of the Selene movement, the comet Chiron will be seen passing overhead. Chiron is an old and regular friend of planet Earth. During the 1970s, it was thought to be another planet moving in an unstable orbit between Saturn and Uranus, but after a dust envelope was detected around its orbit in the 1980s, it was reclassified as a comet. Nostradamus is very keen on comets, which crop up frequently in his predictions. Because of their cyclical nature, they are a useful device for timing events in the future. Why he should have chosen Chiron to be the comet seen by the women of the Selene movement is a mystery, because it is not generally visible in the night sky without the help of a powerful telescope. So there may be another reason for this reference. It could be that he was telling us to look at both the comet Chiron and at the mythological associations of its name in order to give some idea of when this event will take place. We discover, if we look into Greek mythology, that Chiron was a wise centaur who, after being wounded, was transformed by the gods into the constellation Sagittarius, which lies between Scorpio and Capricorn in the zodiac. The sun passes through Sagittarius from November to December, up to the winter solstice, December 21st, 22nd. So we can infer that the march will take place at this time of year. Unfortunately, Chiron in the course of its solar orbit is only occasionally visible on Earth when it happens to be lit by the sun's rays, and we cannot therefore predict a year when this might occur. The story continues with details of a deal made by one who is wounded and eloquent, which fails, but which results in the return of the prisoners. The conflict created by these marchers appears to be on a large scale, for we are next informed of bombs, rickets, and a burned city, with involvement by the people of the island of Sardinia, provoked by the Punic foist, the spiritual return to Carthage. Here we are given a typical Nostradamus reference, combining astrology and ancient mythology. It takes the form of three separate though connected references: Deucalion, after Libra, Phaethon. Deucalion, king of Phthia, was the son of Prometheus, the Titan, who created human beings and gave them fire in Greek mythology. Like Noah, Deucalion survived a flood let loose by Zeus in an ark, a moonship. The Mesopotamian version. His task was to renew the human race after its fall, an important metaphor, for Nostradamus sees the evolution of woman as being highly significant in the rebirth of humanity. The reference to after Libra indicates both the planetary movement and a metaphorical reference to justice. Libra represents the scales of justice, perhaps going to another indication of the prophet's view of women's ideal place in the balance of society. In astrological terms, it lies between Virgo and Scorpio, and the sun passes through Libra during October. After Libra takes us to the December/January period, in which the comet Chiron returns to our skies. It is as though we are receiving a detailed timeline of the progress of the march. We then learn of a connection with Phaethon. Phaethon is a Greek word for shining or radiant. In Greek mythology, Phaethon was the son of the sun god Helios and the nymph Rhode. Phaethon plagued his father to allow him to drive the chariot of the sun through the heavens for a single day. His wish was granted, but Phaethon was unable to control the horses, and the chariot traveled first so high that everyone shivered, and then so close to the earth that he scorched it. To prevent severe damage, Zeus struck him with a thunderbolt, causing him to fall into the Eridanum Po River. He was mourned by his sisters Prote and Clymene. who turn into poplar trees on the banks, weeping amber tears. The reference reiterates that the sun is in the astrological house of Libra. The allegorical aspect of these words emphasizes that men will be brought low through their folly. All this apparently takes place in the months of December/January of the year that Chiron becomes visible from Earth. The last paragraph rounds off the story by telling us that whatever occurs in this mighty stand by women, the result will be an undeniable greater presence of the feminine spirit in the world. If we accept this interpretation of the verses, the march by a group called Selene is one of the pivotal features of women's evolution, which will develop a militant format in the coming years and will push feminine power and equality further along the road, so forming the central core of the feminine critical mass. We may presume this, then, to be a very significant event in our future.